On the spiritual path, there is one important element that one has to experience for them to progress on the spiritual path and to give them a sincerity in following it until the day they die. Now, that important element is Kripa. Now, Kripa in Sanskrit means grace. We often hear the word grace a lot within spiritual circles. And you often hear the word mercy a lot of the time. But grace and mercy are completely different when we put them in this context, when we put it in the context, particularly in regards to Eastern spirituality and philosophy. But we often hear the grace of the Guru or the grace of God and so forth and so on. But what does Kripa actually mean? Because it is an important element, particularly in India, particularly within Sanatana Dharma, Hinduism. And so what does it actually mean? Now, grace in this context means divine grace. It means something coming from the ultimate reality, that which is Brahman. And you feel this and you intuitively experience this, and it becomes something that guides your life in the spiritually positive direction. It guides you away from a materialistic perspective and gives you a focus and a center on God consciousness or Shiva consciousness or Brahman itself, no matter how you want to say that. And so it guides you away from this world of dualism, this world of distraction, and gives you a center and a focus. But the irony here is that you don't get this grace by doing anything. It just comes to you. This divine grace comes to you. It is that grace which you get by no effort itself. Now that may sound odd, but you get it through no effort. It just happens to you. Now I'll explain in some sense why that happens to some people and not to others, but you have to remember that this grace comes to you through no effort. You can't cultivate it, you can't think about it, it just happens. Now on the path, a lot of people say you need this grace to develop, and I'll speak a little bit about that later on as well. But when we speak about this divine grace that we attain by no effort, you would know this and experience this in the way that you may discover a guru that you follow or the teachings themselves, where you may feel touched by Brahman, you may feel touched by the ultimate, and then that is what's guiding your life. I can only think about my own life in regards to this. I was not seeking anything in this life. I didn't want anything. But by Kripa, divine grace, I found exactly the right teachers and gurus and teachings that I needed to guide me on the path. And it's that grace that humbles you and allows you to be settled in this life and have stability and just accept the world for what it is. That's what that grace is. You have been graced by the ultimate, no matter whether it's through a guru or by the teachings themselves. But the ultimate is speaking to you, and you feel the grace, and you feel that you are on the right trajectory, and this is what your life is about going forward. You have given up all frivolous concerns, and your focus is on the divine itself. Every day on the divine, and it gives you immense joy, because that's what grace does, right? The grace of the ultimate gives you immense joy and freedom in living the life that you are living. Once you have experienced this grace, you don't need anything at all. You do not need anything. By the grace of the guru or the teachings itself, you don't need anything. Everything is in its right place. You're exactly where you need to be. And that grace, as I said, is guiding your life. So you are essentially liberated by that grace, because grace is essential on the spiritual path. Kripa is essential on the spiritual path. So once you've experienced that, you don't need no more pujas, you don't need no more long-term retreats, because you've experienced that grace. But it's not that you won't do pujas again. It's not that you won't go on a long retreat. It's just that you've experienced that grace, and they are not as necessary as what they were before you had experienced this grace, with grace coming down and entering your being. And so as I said before, Kripa is very important for each and every one of us on the spiritual path and for any spiritual aspirant. Now, within Sanatana Dharma, it says that Kripa is the ultimate key towards realizing the spiritual path of self-realization. Now, some people experience grace, and that's what thrusts them on the path, right? So it's key to experiencing this grace. Some people may study books or they may practice hatha yoga forever, but they never have felt grace. And so everything then becomes just about the practice or becomes about the books you read. But if you've felt that grace, the practice and the books you read, they all fall into this path that you're following, led by grace, led by the ultimate. And so it's much more beautiful in that way, rather than studying things in a dry fashion or learning things in a dry fashion. You have actually felt this grace, and that's what's guiding your life. So this is what turns someone into a devotional type, right? This is what turns someone into a bhakti once they've experienced the grace. Now, obviously, if we look at the Bhagavad Gita, it's better to be all three yogas in one, right? So to be a bhakti, a karmi, and a jnani. So bhakti yoga, devotional yoga, karma yoga, the yoga of action, and obviously jnana yoga, the yoga of wisdom. Now, obviously, to attain the highest, we have to be a jnani. We have to understand the knowledge of Brahman. But if we don't have enough bhakti, then that can become a very dry endeavor in and of itself. You need to have all three in tune. You need to have sufficient bhakti, sufficient karma, sufficient jnana. And so Kripa can thrust the bhakti, for example, into an intense personal transformation, leading to moksha. Now, that is important, particularly for a bhakti, if someone is only a bhakti. But again, like I said, you need to have all three almost in tune. So eventually you will need jnana to understand the higher knowledge, but it can thrust you on that path towards moksha. But if you have all three in tune, perfect. You're on your way to moksha, liberation. And so once you have sufficient bhakti towards the ultimate, then in some sense, grace will come into your life. But often grace will come into your life and then you will become devoted to the ultimate. Now, this also relates to the Bhagavad Gita, as I was mentioning, where on the battle of Kurukshetra, when Arjuna didn't want to go to war against his cousins, he was trying to fight Krishna. Krishna here being the ultimate reality of Vishnu, which is a representation of Brahman, the ultimate reality. And so Krishna, as the godly sage, is trying to convince him that he has to fulfill his dharma and go to war and be indifferent to what is happening, because he's just following the will of the ultimate, right? And so in the story, obviously, Arjuna does go to war. He surrenders to the ultimate. He surrenders to what is needed in that moment, and grace comes into his life, right? The grace of Krishna comes into his life, where he follows the guru, he follows the sage, he follows the ultimate, and he fulfills his dharma. And everything goes according to how it should be. Not in a sense of right and wrong, good and bad, but how it should be. Now, that's a thing that a lot of us need to think about, right? When we think about our own life and when we think about our own dharma in life, is it going as it should be? Are we following the ultimate to its nth degree? And so in the story, obviously, and in relation to how we should live our life, there needs to be a heightened element of surrender. And it's ironic because once you have surrendered to the ultimate, that's actually where grace comes into your life. And a lot of people say this when they are around a guru, when they surrender to a guru. Now I'm talking about an authentic guru, not about the millions of fake gurus there are in the world today, but an authentic guru that you will find still in the Himalayas, and you'll still find in parts of India, and they don't have YouTube channels, right? But they are dedicated to the tradition. Then you will feel a lot of grace come into your life when you come across an authentic guru, or you come across the teachings. You'll feel the grace come into your life. When you're devoted to the teachings, that devotion is the magnetic pull that brings grace into your life. That is what is important. And I think a lot of people are short-sighted when they think that they're higher than the teachings. They don't need the teachings anymore. They're too good. You know, there's all of this competitive spirit in modern spirituality, which is really, really strange, because a prerequisite to even enter the spiritual path is humility. So surrender is very important if we want to feel grace in our life. Now, you're probably asking, why would the ultimate reality be partial and not fair to each and every individual when in regards to grace? Why would the ultimate differentiate and not be fair and be partial? You know, that's a question that comes to the mind with a lot of spiritual aspirants, because, you know, we live in a world today where everyone thinks everything is equal, that everything is fair, but that's not actually how nature is. I can dream in my mind that I'm a better basketballer than Michael Jordan, but that is not a fact. Now, that doesn't mean that nature is against me. That doesn't mean Brahman is against me. I am exactly where I need to be. Michael Jordan is exactly where he needs to be. That's the beauty of nature. So in regards to this concern and this question, what governs if someone experiences grace in their life? It's obviously karma. Now, I don't mean the karma that you experience in your life. I'm talking about past lives karma. I'm talking about the karma that your jiva, your ego persona system, your identity has experienced life after life. Now, just like anything, if you've tilled the soil long enough, then it is fertile enough for growth, right? And that relates also into how we evolve as a soul from life to life to life. And so the non-dualist will say, well, there's no lives, there's no jiva, and that is true from the ultimate level. But you've got to remember that not everyone is at that stage. And also it is important to keep some humility and to realize that on the path, you also, as a non-dual police officer, were toiling in the fields and trying to grow as an individual in your past life. And so a lot of reasoning behind why someone experiences grace in Sanatana Dharma comes back to past life karma. And it's interesting because even sage Vashishta, within the great text of the Yoga Vashishta, said that grace was the only way to transcend the bondage of lifetimes of karma. That's interesting, right? Because as I said, the main reason that someone encounters grace in their life and they meet a guru or they come across the teachings is because of karma. And then you have Vashishta saying that grace itself is the only way that we can transcend all of our karma. And so it's in that complete surrender, as I mentioned in relation to the Bhagavad Gita, that we overcome all of that karma and we come back into our ultimate nature, which is Atman, which is Brahman. And so that is really interesting because a lot of people will say, well, you have to do this many yogas or you have to know all of this knowledge in this text and this and that is all well and good. But if grace hasn't come down through you, then Vashishta is saying, then we cannot be liberated. We won't be liberated from all of our past life karma. And so we will still be bound and we will come back life after life after life. So he's advising us to be very careful. If grace comes into our life and we don't surrender, this could be a big mistake. So if you've met a guru, you've met a teacher, or you've come across the teachings and you feel this grace and you feel the path opening up for you and you are moving with life as a piece of life and you have surrendered to it and it opens your heart in doing so, to ignore that is the greatest crime according to Vashishta. And so the irony here is that, as Vashishta was saying, that by grace we transcend the bondage of past life karma. It's ironic how grace comes into our life. It comes by no effort. Now, if we follow that path of no effort, which is similar to the path in Taoism known as Wu Wei, the path of non-doing, non-interference, intelligent spontaneity, then obviously how could we accrue more karma? Because we are following our path, we have surrendered to the world, but we are not acting as a jiva. We are not trying to influence reality. We are not trying to promote our agenda. We are just moving through life as a piece of life, as a piece of Brahman itself. And that is the beautiful thing when grace comes into your life, because you have stopped all effort. You are allowing life to move through you. You are allowing the ultimate to emanate its grace through you, and you are living a beautiful existence where you are not bound by this or that. You are just focused on the ultimate and you have surrendered to the ultimate reality of Brahman. And in doing so, you have attained the ultimate on the spiritual path, the end of the spiritual path, the culmination of the spiritual path, if you will, which is moksha, liberation. And you are one with Brahman as a result. You are that Atman, which is Brahman. Finally, and it's through that grace that you have attained this ultimate reality that you are and that we all are, but we are all waiting for the grace of the ultimate to enter our lives so that we too can be liberated in this life. Shanti, shanti, shanti.